All right, excellent. We're here today with Nayan Patel. We've probably heard the phrase "think outside the box," Nayan, and I know a lot of folks have as well. But in healthcare, sometimes we found that the real opportunity isn't thinking outside of the box; it's changing the box entirely. And we're speaking with some leaders about what they think could change in healthcare, especially around technology and reshaping the system. So for people who may not know you yet or your work, do you mind giving us just a quick name and an introduction or maybe a version of what you're passionate about in the healthcare industry?
Yes, my name is Nayan Patel. I'm a former hospital CIO. I've been in the healthcare technology IT space for about 20 years. First 10 years prior to that was in semiconductors. So we kind of got the
Cool.
technology side a little bit down. And where I'm at now is I'm with a contactless vitals monitoring company. So we're all about kind of using technology, but in a frictionless way to help improve patient care. And in terms of passion, it's all about how do we improve patient care or improve the life of humans through technology, but at the same time, not be so techy.
Instead of we don't want to fight the technology, we want it to help us, right?
Yes.
It's a big thing. Yes. If you could snap your fingers in in the healthcare industry to change the box in some way, what would you change?
I think the security side is one of the biggest challenges we have is we put so much controls in place that it prevents us from being operationally efficient. And so when you think of what clinicians have to do to access any type of medical flow, there's more controls in place that slows them down than really speeds them up. Now, there's a lot of things that does speed them up. We know there's so much new technology with ambient AI and whatnot that is helping them. But during the actual day-to-day clinical workflow, I think they run into more hurdles than they would like to deal with.
It's a little bit of a shift, right? And okay, we all understand that technology can propel us forward to some degree, but now how do we make sure that it's not also the thing preventing us from getting to that next level, right? So
Yeah.
I think there's solves with technology to help us with technology as well. You mentioned, and I didn't get the tooling that you were referring to. I think it was something AI related. What was that you referred to? Could you speak a little bit
Yeah,
about?
what I was referring to was ambient documentation that a lot of hospitals and healthcare organizations are using today to essentially take care of physician documentation, and it's a virtual transcription tool that just like we're doing probably here, you'll listen to the whole conversation and it will summarize it for the doctor to have a nice patient record with recommendations, captures all the history and physicals, does the medical note per se, and then the physician just has to review it at the end and sign off on it. The time it would take them to do that, this saves them, I'm going to guess, three-fourths of their normal time to do that type of documentation, if not more.
And I would imagine it gives them a nice body of maybe not necessarily evidence, but something that they could, refer back to and maybe even, throw technology at to find insights or something from too. So really cool way of getting people some time back in their day and maybe focusing it on something, important that they weren't able to focus on before. So
Yeah,
that's really
absolutely.
cool.
And one of the things that we started doing, even within our solution with Neteera, the one that I mentioned, the contactless vitals monitoring, we have a device. This is the actual size of the device. It's no bigger than a deck of cards. It's a motion sensor, but it allows the clinicians to capture vitals without any wearables. So again, trying to create a more frictionless environment. So when a patient is coming in or just monitoring them at night, as an example, they don't have to be woken up now to get heart rate, respiratory rate. And that type of experience is what we're trying to do to help the nursing workflow improve and giving them time to do more critical work for acute care patients versus more, busy work per se if they're just taking vitals and tracking into the system and the manual work is for them.
I think it's very interesting. And, it kind of leans into my next question, which is, where do you think technology could most dramatically change the system? And I certainly don't want to put words in your mouth, but, just hearing about some of these different ways that technology currently is with that device there, do you think that that's the future, or is there another level beyond that, that would make it even better than it is currently?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think as we get better and better in finding ways to use technology, we're going to go to what I'll call the Star Trek tricorder stage, right? Like you're
I
going to
can't
have
wait.
this device that will be able to somehow monitor your body in a different way and get a lot of essential information. Now, are we there yet? No, but we're finding different and different technology to capture that type of information in a frictionless way, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we'll continue to do improvements there. You're going to see, a lot more utilization of ambient technology. You'll see camera-based systems that are already out there as well that, can detect movement of a patient to prevent falls, to,
Yeah.
or if they're not moving enough, they'll prevent pressure injuries while they're sitting in their beds too long. So there's a lot of different kind of technologies that can be used, but how do you put them all together in an environment that's not costly, that is operationally efficient, easy to maintain, and can be sustainable long term?
Yep. Yeah, that's the challenge. And secure, right? Like I know that we were
And
talking
secure,
about that
yeah.
before, as more and more of these edge types of devices or things that are, running across just a regular network, Wi-Fi or whatever else, Bluetooth, the more that these exist, I think, the more we need to find ways to make sure that they're existing the right way, or they've got the right amount of communication, or to the right place is happening. And I think it was a point that you were making earlier. There's a lot of controls in place, right, to make sure that things go the right way, both from the technology standpoint and from, I'm sure, the law in many cases too. And so how do we balance that so that this technology can enable the patient to have better metrics, or more meaningful information going to a doctor, without them sacrificing their security. So I think that's a big piece of the puzzle that we still have to dig into a little bit. Really cool tech, though. I very much appreciate that device in front of you. There's others that excite me anytime I come across them, and just the idea of having something that I don't have to interface with a ton, primarily is a big deal. But also, I think I've noticed, and I'm no doctor, obviously, but I've noticed that in a lot of cases, individuals have a certain, level, whether you're talking about blood sugar or something like that. I think that's pretty standard, but other metrics may not be as standardized, or there may be, level of deviation that's different per the individual. And so I think what we're seeing with some of these devices is you can have much more personalized care. For example, if I'm a person that my doctor or my endocrinologist knows I run at 120 milligrams for blood sugar more commonly, then my deviation, 20% is different than a person sitting next to me. And so I get that more personalized care in that world. Whereas before I was just a red flag, I'm immediately into type 2 diabetes zone. And so it's very interesting because I think it's going to solve a lot of challenges that we see, not only with scheduling patients and their visits and their care, but their outcomes, right? At the end of the day. And so I'm interested, if you're starting to see that already, or, if there's more things like that on the horizon that you've seen as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you just talked about is sort of a personalization behind it. Our device itself is just like many others. You want to put the establishment of a baseline associated with it. So when we put it in place for every patient, you have to establish baselines, because somebody who's 5'1" is going to be very different than somebody who's 6'3". Like the just body composition is different, and their heart rate, their weight, everything is going to be different. So their breathing mechanism. So you establish these baselines, and then you're right. Then you can say, okay, what's the trending data look like over 3 to 5 days? And is there a 20% variance, as you indicated? What we've found is, when you are able to identify those things, you can actually catch a early detection of an adverse event about to happen. Right now, our device is almost up to 80% accurate, finding something up to 5 days in advance, particularly in long-term care facilities. So that's what the technology is going to start revealing. And when you start putting more algorithms and AI behind it, it's going to get even more and more accurate in terms of being able to detect what could be happening. It doesn't say something, you know exactly what's happening, but just be able to say that something's going on in the body. Why don't we put some better telemetry around it and do some real extra wired capabilities before an event happens, and then you're forced to do that. So with some of the organizations we've caught this early enough, and so now the process is around treating them in place. So before they get sent to a hospital or an ED department, just get them addressed before they have to go. So that saves time, effort, and a lot of cost as well, instead of them having to go to the ER or get checked into a hospital.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's really getting to that place where it can be preventative instead of reactive care, right? And I think that's been a hard thing to get to without some of these sensors or other devices, to get us there. Because the alternative is just more blood draws or more measuring or more trips to the doctor. So really interesting to see technology in this space. It excites me probably more than more than it should in some ways, but
Well, I think in our case, our solution is very easy to understand because even before I joined the organization, I had a similar reaction to a lot of people do is, oh, this will be great for my elderly parent or my elderly in-law or whatever it might be, right? Uncle and aunt. And because, so that home health market is something that will come into play at some point as well. And can you put this in a home environment and what are the workflow challenges around that? And maybe it's just an extra monitoring capability that says something's happening, and then before you have to call 911, you can have like scheduled or something
yep,
before something more serious occurs.
yep, very promising stuff. You mentioned that you were in semiconductors, and so I know I've got somebody who's deep in technology. Do you think that there's a thing that people misunderstand about healthcare transformation? Is there one thing that you would identify as a misunderstanding there?
Yeah, I'd say it's less about the technology; it's more about the process. I think people don't understand that you really got to focus on the clinical outcomes. What are you trying to do, or the business outcomes? If you're trying
Yeah,
to help a hospital organization, how are you going to help them either make more money or improve their operations? It's pretty well known that healthcare is definitely a little bit behind in technology. That kind of is attributed to many different factors. One of them just being that there's a lot of different processes in place, and every hospital, it can be a small, medium, or large healthcare system in different geographical regions. States have different regulations. So there's a lot of reasons why you can't get certain things implemented and standardized across the board. But because of that, you really just have to focus on these point solutions that are focused on the business outcomes. It's not really about the tech as much. It's what are you doing to help their business?
it's a yeah, patient outcomes, business outcomes, and things like that that you think are missed in those cases.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk about our tech all day, but it doesn't really matter. It's what are we doing to help to improve the business? One is helping nurses reduce their time to check on patients, and not having to wake up the patient at 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. in the morning just to do a vitals check. Just those things alone creates a better user experience.
Yep. My background is design and user experience, and so obviously it means a lot to me as well. And I think for a good portion of my career, I've walked into those scenarios where we've had very strong technology, things that could really, really make a good effect or an effect on a group of individuals or an organization. But they always brought me in to help to make it work, to make it usable, because you can have a big powerful cannon behind you, but if it doesn't do anything, it's just a paperweight. So
Yeah.
that means a lot to me, not just from the patient's interaction necessarily with this stuff, but their outcome. I think is something that even gets lost in UX, right? You think so much about experience, and I think in some cases you have to think about how do you get the experience away. How do you remove this friction, and sometimes it's by just the technology disappearing. And so it's good to hear, others kind of thinking the same way.
Yeah, and
What I
kind of
was,
to that end, I would just add on one more thing that, a
yeah,
lot of times when we're coming with new solutions, we don't want to add on and give the clinicians one more thing to look at. We just want to fit in behind the scenes, and making sure that whatever we're providing is an alert or something that's within their existing process.
yeah,
Because you really want to reduce what the complexity that they have right now. And in general, in healthcare, probably in many organizations, there's application rationalization that's happening, right? Doing
yeah,
more with less and consolidating more into platforms of different software platforms, regardless of the function that you're in.
yeah. Have you seen, challenges specific to that transformation? Do you think that people are missing? Is there something that would help to make that transformation easier for those, small, medium, or large organizations? Is there a trend that you see?
Yeah, I think with the larger ones, it's time because there's usually the larger organizations are a consolidation of acquired facilities that had different systems. So you may have almost a same application, but three different versions of that application within that same healthcare system because they bought the software at a different time, they configured it differently. You can't just say, okay, now move to this version because it's not completely apples to apples type of thing. So
Yeah,
it's not as easy to do, but I think there are certain organizations that'll take a big bang approach and saying we're going to go move to this. It's going to be painful to get there, but once you get there, then it's going to be on a larger platform that provides a lot of those benefits of being on a single system.
we get the single looking pane, right? Too, if you have that one point of, you know, yeah, storing everything. It's also cost savings there, I'm sure, right?
Yeah,
And when I talk to folks about this and other settings, I think a lot of the times what came up was the cost conversation. Obviously, do you think that that's the biggest driver for some of these like transformations, or is it more increasing capability?
I mean, certainly cost is a big part right now because most healthcare organizations were challenged after COVID, and
Yeah,
margins are much lower than any other industry, right? I think it's pretty well known that margins in the hospital are tight. It's and it's the payer versus provider side story.
yeah,
So payers being the insurance payers, and then the providers are whether you're a clinician or a hospital or an ambulatory facility, you're a provider and the margins for them are much smaller than the payers who have a lot more money. And if we could, continue to find a happy medium, both have to exist because it's just business at the end. It's a capitalistic society.
yeah,
But if we could move some of that margin to the provider side, that'll improve the overall business of healthcare.
yeah. That makes sense. A lot of the individuals that I've talked to, and especially in the larger healthcare systems, have said that one of the big sticking points that they've always had and don't see a way around is the legacy data that they have to support. You were mentioning this, I think, with that comment about people having the same software or maybe the same application doing the same thing in multiple installed multiple times or maybe licensed multiple times. Is that typically the reason that you run into that type of thing? Is they're supporting legacy data, or it's just like a separate team's running it? Then they spin up another one because they need it again, type of thing, or both.
It's probably a combination of both, and it depends on the organization. It's a big
Yeah,
investment to move out of it, right? I mean, it's like back in the day when everybody was on Windows 98 and you decided you're going to go to Windows 7 or whatever, Windows 10, 11, right?
yeah,
Uh, the environments to make that type of change, it's not a quick lift and shift type of scenario. And so
yeah,
that takes an investment. And then some take a little bit longer to make that decision on that investment because they don't see the true ROI. It's become more like doing an oil change on your car. You got to do it. You got to do your 30,000, 60,000 maintenance spend. You don't have to, but if you don't, there's
you
risk,
should.
right?
Yeah,
And then how long is your car going to last, right? Most of these software applications, particularly in healthcare, EMR systems, they can go 25, 30 years, right? And
wow,
until somebody realizes, okay, this thing is not as efficient as it could be. Same thing like
Yeah.
cars. We can keep cars running for a long time, but you're also missing a lot of the new features of the newer cars that are out there.
Yeah, it's not going to drive you. The 25-year-old car will not drive you around. Hopefully.
Or
Oh,
the
that's
rear view
cool.
camera's missing, right?
Right. Yes. Yes. All the things we come to expect these days. So really cool. I don't know if you have anything that you wanted to add. I just wanted to note. Obviously did a little bit of research and found some of the stuff that you'd done in your past, and one of the things that came up was that a motto, I believe, or a quote that you had used: "Improving lives with data and with the golden rule." That was you, correct?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Could you tell? I mean, just give me a little summary. I mean, I know we talked about all of those things, except for the golden rule. Hopefully, everybody knows. But what got you to that? What is it that made you come up with that quote and utilize it and carry it forward?
Yeah, I think I mean I kind of combined a few things that I've learned over the years, right? I mean, it's all about using data. You've probably heard, "In God we trust, all others bring data," right? I love that. That was from Edward Dent. It's all about process improvement. But then the other side was the golden rule, because do unto others as you would want to have done upon you, type of thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just character, who you are, and trying to carry yourself a certain way. And I'm not going to say I'm the best person at anything, but I try to be that, right? And so that's followed by the principles of the golden rule, and then use data to support making changes to improve lives.
I love it. And by the way, Nayan, I don't know anybody who's humble enough. I don't think they would call themselves the best person. That would be a weird. That would be a weird thing to do, right? So
Yeah. Well,
no,
I
that's
know
good.
I've got plenty of areas to improve on. I'll leave it at that.
There you go. Hey, as long as we're looking, that's all. That's the important piece. Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.